The key card trembled in her hand, and I didn't know then that a stranger's whisper was about to save my life. I have replayed that moment more times than I care to admit. The fluorescent lights above the hotel counter hummed softly, like a tired insect caught in a glass jar, and the smell of industrial lemon cleaner clung to the air. I remember thinking how ordinary everything looked, how safe, how forgettable, and yet my fingers were shaking before anything had even happened. It was close to midnight when I walked into the Pinecrest Hotel in Denver. My shoulders ached from the flight, my suitcase wheels clicking unevenly across the polished tile floor like a metronome out of rhythm. And, I had been traveling alone for years by then. Conferences, consulting gigs, little contracts that kept my calendar full and my apartment empty. Solitude had become my routine companion. I wore it like a coat, sometimes warm, sometimes heavy. The lobby was quiet except for the low murmur of a television mounted high in the corner, playing a muted news channel. The receptionist stood behind the counter, her dark hair tied neatly in a bun, her expression calm but alert, the kind of attentiveness you only notice later, when you realize it meant something. Her name tag read Maya. She greeted me with a polite smile, the kind hotels train their staff to perfect, but when she looked down at her computer screen and then back up at me, something flickered across her face. Not fear, not exactly. It was more like urgency wrapped in professionalism, like someone trying to hold a door closed while pretending nothing was wrong on the other side. "Welcome, Ms. Vance," she said, her voice low and smooth. "Checking in for one night." I nodded, offering a tired smile. My throat was dry from airplane air and cheap pretzels. "Yes, just one," she typed for a moment, her nails tapping lightly against the keyboard. Then she reached into a drawer and pulled out a keycard sleeve. I watched her hands, steady, deliberate, and I remember thinking how comforting it was to see someone else in control of small details. But then she paused. Her eyes lifted to mine, and the air between us shifted. It was subtle, like the first ripple before a storm touches water. She slid the sleeve toward me, then stopped halfway. Her fingers pressed against the counter, knuckles whitening just slightly. "Miss Vance," she whispered, leaning forward so quietly that I smelled her peppermint gum. "Take this one instead. Don't go to the room you booked." For a second, I thought I had misheard her. The lobby was empty. The television flickered silently. The elevator doors remained closed, stainless steel reflecting the artificial lights. Everything looked exactly as it should. But her eyes were not calm anymore. I blinked. "I'm sorry." She didn't repeat herself. Instead, she slid a different keycard across the counter, her movement swift and discreet, like a magician swapping cards in a deck. Her expression returned to neutral so quickly it almost convinced me I had imagined the entire exchange. "This will be more comfortable," she said in her regular voice. "Elevators to your left." I stood there for half a heartbeat too long, my mind trying to catch up to the moment. A dozen questions fluttered inside me, but none of them formed into words. Fatigue makes you obedient in strange ways. Exhaustion dulls curiosity. So I took the card. An inch card, 60. The plastic felt warm, as if it had been sitting in her hand longer than necessary. I thanked her, my voice uncertain, and turned toward the elevator. My suitcase wheels rattled behind me, echoing off the marble floor. I glanced back once, just once, and she was watching me, her lips pressed together, her posture stiff. I told myself it was nothing. A simple room upgrade, a clerical error. Hotels shuffled guests around all the time. Still, my heartbeat didn't slow. 10 paces. My heartbeat didn't snap. Before that night, my life had been simple in the way adulthood sometimes becomes simple. Not because it lacks problems, but because you learn how to carry them quietly. I was 30, too, unmarried, and used to independence. My parents had passed years earlier, and my closest family was my older brother, Ethan, who had a habit of worrying about me like I was still 15. He was a police officer back home in Ohio, the kind who ironed his shirts with meticulous care and texted me weather alerts as if storms personally targeted his little sister. We spoke almost every day, usually late at night when our schedules overlapped. His voice was a constant in my life, a familiar lighthouse beam sweeping across uncertain waters. I worked as a freelance marketing consultant, a job that sounded glamorous to acquaintances and exhausting to those who knew the truth. Airports became my waiting rooms. Hotels became my temporary homes. I learned the smells of different cities, the taste of tap water in unfamiliar places, the way elevator music varied from region to. There was comfort in predictability. There was loneliness in it too. That week in Denver was supposed to be routine. A client meeting, a presentation, maybe dinner with an old college friend if schedules aligned. Nothing dramatic, nothing memorable. I had packed light, a navy blazer, a white blouse, comfortable. The contents of my suitcase were as unremarkable as my expectations. Yet as I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the 6th floor, Maya's whisper replayed in my mind like a song stuck on a broken record. Take this one instead. Don't go to the room you booked. The elevator doors closed with a soft chime. My reflection stared back at me from the mirrored walls. Tired eyes, hair slightly frizzed from dry cabin air, a faint crease between my brows. I looked like any other traveler passing through another anonymous building. And maybe that was the point. And the hallway on the 6th floor smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and something floral, artificial and overly sweet. The lights were dimmer here, casting long shadows that stretched across the patterned carpet like fingers. My room number, 604, glowed softly beside the door. I slid the keycard into the slot, heard the click, and stepped inside. The room was ordinary. A queen bed with crisp white sheets, a small desk, a lamp casting a warm amber glow. The air conditioning hummed steadily. Nothing felt wrong. Nothing screamed danger. I set my suitcase down and kicked off my shoes, letting my toes sink into the carpet. Relief washed over me in small waves. The simple comfort of being alone behind a locked door. I texted Ethan out of habit. Checked in. Safe. Talk tomorrow, he replied almost instantly. Good. Lock the door. Love you, kid. I smiled. He always called me that, even now. I changed into pajamas, washed my face, and sat on the edge of the bed. Outside the window, the city lights blinked like distant stars. My eyelids grew heavy, my mind drifting toward sleep. Then, somewhere down the hall, or maybe below me, I heard a sound that didn't belong. A scream. It was muffled, brief, and distant enough that I questioned it immediately. Hotels carry strange noises through their walls. Televisions. I told myself it was nothing. I lay back against the pillows and closed my eyes. But a second scream followed. Longer, raw, human. And in that moment, the key card in my purse felt heavier than it had any right to feel. The second scream didn't fade the way ordinary noises do. It lingered in the air, like smoke that refuses to clear. I sat upright so quickly the mattress springs protested beneath me. My heart pounded against my ribs, each beat louder than the hum of the air conditioner. For a moment I didn't move. I simply listened, that instinctive stillness animals have when they sense danger before they see it. Silence followed, and silence can be more frightening than sound. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and padded toward the door, the carpet soft beneath my bare feet. I pressed my ear lightly against the wood, feeling foolish and tense all at once. The hallway seemed quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that has weight to it, like a blanket thrown over something struggling underneath. You're imagining things, I told myself. You're tired. But then came a thud, heavy, violent, followed by a muffled crash that reverberated through the walls like distant thunder. The sound didn't belong to plumbing or televisions or drunken laughter. It was the sound of something being thrown. Or someone. My stomach tightened. Without thinking, I reached for my phone and texted Ethan. Are you awake? The typing bubbles appeared almost instantly. Yeah. What's up? I hesitated, suddenly unsure how to describe what I'd heard without sounding irrational. My thumbs hovered over the screen. I'm at the hotel. I heard screaming. Like real screaming. Maybe I'm overreacting. His reply came faster this time. Which room are you in? There was a pause. Longer than usual. Then Dane, stay in your room. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone unless you see a uniform and badge. I'm serious, Sienna. I exhaled slowly. He always leaned toward caution. It was his job, after all, but something in his wording made my spine straighten. I checked the lock, sliding the metal latch into place. The click sounded small, inadequate. Another crash echoed through the building. This time it was unmistakable. My pulse raced, my mouth suddenly dry. I moved to the window and peeked through the curtain, half expecting to see flashing lights below, but the parking lot lay calm and undisturbed. Cars sat in neat rows, a lone street lamp flickered. The normalcy of the scene unsettled me more than chaos would have. A knock came at my door. 3 sharp raps. I froze. The sound seemed to vibrate inside my chest. I stared at the door as if it might speak next. My phone buzzed in my hand. Ethan again. You locked it. Yes. Good. Don't open it. Another knock. Louder. More insistent. Hotel security, a male voice called from the other side. Calm. Authoritative. We need to check your room, ma'am. I swallowed. My mind raced. The voice sounded professional, but something about the timing, the immediacy, felt wrong. I hadn't called anyone. No one should even know I was awake. I'm fine, I called back, my voice thinner than I intended. I don't need anything. A pause. Then the handle rattled gently, testing. Not forceful, just probing. My heart leapt into my throat. My phone buzzed again. Do not open it, Ethan wrote. Ask to see ID through the peephole if you must. But honestly, don't engage. I said I'm fine, I repeated, louder this time. My palms had begun to sweat, the phone slick against my skin. The voice on the other side softened. Ma'am, there's been an incident on this floor. We're making sure all guests are safe. That sentence should have reassured me. Instead, it did the opposite. If there had been an incident, why was he alone? Why no radio chatter? Why no commotion in the hallway? I stepped quietly to the peephole and looked through. The corridor appeared empty. No uniform. No figure. Just the patterned carpet stretching under dim lights. A chill slid down my spine. The knock came again. This time from the side of the door, not the center, as if whoever stood there knew I was looking. I jerked back instinctively, my breath catching. He's still here, I texted Ethan. No one in the peephole. The typing bubbles appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Call the front desk, now. My fingers trembled as I dialed. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered. This is Maya. How can I help you? Her calmness steadied me slightly. Hi, it's Sienna. Room 614. Someone's knocking, saying there's security. But there is no security on your floor, she interrupted, her voice dropping into the same whisper she had used at the counter. Do not open the door. We've already called the police. My knees weakened, and I sank onto the edge of the bed. The air in the room felt thinner, harder to breathe. What's happening? I asked. I can't explain right now, she said quickly. Just stay inside. You did the right thing. The line clicked dead. For a moment, everything was silent again. Then came the sound of the door handle turning, not gently this time, but forcefully. Metal scraping against metal. The latch held, but the vibration traveled through the wood and into my bones. I backed away, my gaze darting around the room as if searching for escape routes that didn't exist. The window was 6 stories up. The bathroom offered no exit. The closet was a box. He's trying the door. I texted Ethan, my thumbs barely cooperating. Barricade it. He replied, use furniture. Stay quiet. The practicality of his instructions grounded me. I dragged the desk chair across the carpet and wedged it beneath the handle. Then I pushed the small dresser closer, the wood scraping loudly. Each sound I made felt like an announcement of my fear, but doing nothing felt worse. Another shove hit the door, harder. The frame trembled. My chest tightened, tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. I pressed my back against the dresser, breathing shallowly. The air smelled faintly of detergent and stale air conditioning, ordinary scents that suddenly felt surreal in the face of something so violently out of place. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. more than one pair this time. Voices, distant, urgent. Then, finally, the unmistakable wail of sirens filtering through the window from the street below. The door handle stopped moving. Silence returned, but it was a different silence now, one filled with the echo of what almost happened. My phone buzzed. "Police are there," Ethan wrote. "Stay put until you hear them identify themselves clearly." I nodded to no one, my body still rigid. Minutes passed like hours. Eventually, a firm knock came, followed by a clear, official voice. "Denver Police Department. Ma'am, are you safe inside?" I didn't answer immediately. My throat felt locked. Only when they repeated themselves, and I heard the faint crackle of a radio, did I finally move toward the door. My hands shook as I slid the latch back. The chair scraped away. The dresser inched aside. Each movement felt like peeling away a fragile shield. When I opened the door, two uniformed officers stood in the hallway, their presence both reassuring and surreal. Behind them, the corridor buzzed with activity. More officers, hotel staff, the distant murmur of guests peeking from partially open doors. "You did exactly right," he said. And in that moment, I realized how close almost can come to becoming never. The hallway smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant, a strange mixture that clung to the air as officers moved past me with purposeful strides. Their radios crackled in short bursts of coded language I didn't understand. Every sound felt amplified, shoes against carpet, the click of pens, the low murmur of questions being asked and answered somewhere out of sight. I stood in my doorway, hugging my own elbows, suddenly unsure what to do with my hands, my body, my thoughts. One of the officers, a woman with kind eyes and a braid tucked neatly beneath her cap, asked if I was injured. I shook my head. My voice didn't seem to exist yet. "Can you tell me what happened?" she asked gently. The question sounded simple, but my mind struggled to arrange the last hour into something linear. It felt more like a collection of sensations than events. The trembling key card, the scream, the door handle rattling like loose bones, Ethan's messages glowing on my screen. "I heard screaming," I said finally, "and someone tried to get into my room. He said he was security." She nodded, jotting notes. "You did the right thing not opening the door." Those words again. "You did the right thing." They sounded comforting, but they also made something inside me tremble, because doing the right thing had felt like blind luck more than wisdom. Down the hall, near the elevator, I saw Maya standing beside another officer. Her posture was straight, but her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, knuckles pale. When our eyes met, she offered a small nod. It wasn't a smile, it was something deeper, acknowledgement, relief, and perhaps a shared understanding that a thin thread had held the night together. I wanted to thank her right then, to cross the hallway and wrap my arms around her, but my feet remained rooted as if the carpet had grown around them. The officers asked me to stay inside my room while they finished securing the floor. I sat on the edge of the bed again, the same spot where I had been minutes earlier when the world still felt ordinary. The lamp cast a warm glow over the beige walls, but warmth no longer meant safety. It was just light. My phone buzzed. "You okay?" Ethan wrote. "Yes. Police are here," he called immediately. I answered, and the sound of his voice, steady, familiar, protective, loosened something in my chest that I hadn't realized was clenched. "Talk to me," he said softly. I described everything, my words stumbling over each other at first, then finding rhythm. He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush me. That was Ethan's gift. He could make silence feel like support rather than absence. "You trusted your gut," he said when I finished. "That matters more than people realize." I almost laughed at that. It hadn't felt like intuition. It had felt like confusion mixed with fatigue. But maybe intuition doesn't always arrive as a dramatic alarm. Maybe sometimes it's just a quiet discomfort you choose not to ignore. When I hung up, there was another knock, lighter this time, accompanied by the braided officer's voice. "Ma'am, you're safe to step out now if you'd like. We've detained someone." Detained someone. The phrase landed heavily, like a stone dropped into still water. I stepped into the hallway again. The energy had shifted from urgency to controlled aftermath. Officers spoke in calmer tones. A yellow evidence bag lay on a small table near the elevator. I noticed details I hadn't seen before: the faded pattern in the carpet, the faint scuff marks along the baseboards, the way the overhead lights flickered slightly. Ordinary things returning to focus. Was he on this floor? I asked quietly. The officer hesitated just long enough for me to sense the weight of her answer. Yes. He was near room 308. The number meant nothing to me at first, just a sequence of digits. Then it clicked. 308 was the room I had originally booked. The one Maya had warned me away from. A chill crept across my skin, slow and deliberate. I turned toward the elevator area where Maya still stood. She looked exhausted now. Her composure softened at the edges. I walked to her, my steps measured, my voice barely above a whisper. "You told me not to go there," she nodded. "I'm glad you listened." "Why?" The word came out small, almost childlike. "How did you know?" She glanced at the officers, then back at me. "I noticed something off with the check, and earlier tonight," she said carefully. "I didn't have proof yet, just patterns." Patterns? The word lingered. It sounded clinical, but her eyes told me it had been instinct layered over observation, the kind of awareness people develop when they've seen enough to recognize danger before it announces itself. "I owe you," I began. She shook her head gently. "You owe me nothing. Just be safe." Her humility struck me harder than any dramatic declaration could have. There was no desire for praise in her tone, no hero's posture, just quiet relief. An officer approached us then, asking Maya a few procedural questions. I stepped aside, feeling like a spectator to a scene I had nearly been written into as the victim. The realization made my stomach turn. At the far end of the hallway, 2 officers escorted a man toward the elevator. His hands were cuffed behind his back. He wore a dark jacket, his head slightly lowered. I couldn't see his face clearly, only the outline of a person who looked painfully ordinary. Not monstrous, not cinematic, just human. And that, somehow, was the most unsettling part. I expected evil to have a visible shape, sharp edges, warning signs. But he looked like someone you might pass in a grocery store without a second glance, someone who might hold a door open for you and smile politely. I realized then how thin the veil of normalcy can be, how danger often dresses itself in familiarity. The elevator doors closed on him with a soft metallic slide. The hallway grew quiet. Guests began to retreat into their rooms, whispers trailing behind them like loose threads. I returned to my room and sat by the window, watching the red and blue lights flicker against the parked cars below. The city continued its rhythm, distant traffic, a siren far away, the blinking of traffic signals. Life outside moved forward, indifferent to the small catastrophe that had almost become mine. My reflection in the glass looked different now. Not older, not braver, just aware, as if a layer of innocence had been peeled away, revealing something sharper underneath. I thought about Maya's whisper, about the simple decision to trust a feeling I couldn't explain. Sometimes survival isn't a grand act of courage. Sometimes it's a quiet series of small choices that align just long enough to carry you through the night. I didn't sleep after that. I sat with the lamp on, listening to the air conditioner hum, breathing in the sterile scent of the room, feeling the weight of what I had narrowly avoided. And somewhere in the building, room 308 stood empty, a number on a door that could have been my story's ending instead of its turning point. Morning arrived without ceremony. No golden sunrise, no cinematic relief. Just a pale gray light slipping through the curtains, the hum of traffic below, and the dull ache behind my eyes from a night without sleep. The world outside continued as if nothing had happened, and that felt almost offending. I sat at the small desk with a paper cup of hotel coffee growing cold between my hands. It smelled burnt, sharp and bitter, the kind of coffee you drink for function, not comfort. My reflection in the dark screen of my laptop looked hollowed out, like a sketch that had been erased too many times. A soft knock came at the door. My body stiffened instantly. Fear is quick to relearn its place. I walked to the door slowly, checking the peephole twice before opening it. Maya stood there, her hair now loose around her shoulders, her uniform replaced by a simple cardigan. She looked younger in daylight, less guarded. In her hands, she held 2 fresh cups of coffee and a small paper bag. "I thought you might not want to go down to the lobby," she said gently. The kindness in her voice nearly unraveled me. I stepped aside and let her in. She placed the coffee on the desk and opened the paper bag. 2 muffins, blueberry and banana nut. The normalcy of the gesture felt surreal, like offering tea after a storm has torn the roof away. "Thank you," I said, my voice quieter than intended. We sat across from each other, the small desk suddenly feeling like a confessional booth. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air carried the faint scent of detergent and baked sugar from the muffins. Ordinary smells trying to reclaim space from extraordinary memories. "I didn't want to scare you last night," she began. But I couldn't ignore what I saw. I leaned forward slightly. "What did you see?" she exhaled, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "A man checked in earlier using your name. Same ID, same reservation. But something didn't sit right." He avoided eye contact. He rushed the process. And when I verified the booking, there were 2 confirmations tied to the same identity. My chest tightened. 2, she nodded. I called my manager, but it was late. I didn't have enough authority to cancel anything without proof. So when you arrived, I made a decision. I reassigned your room quietly. Her words landed with the weight of realization. Someone had used my identity, not by accident, not by clerical error, intentionally. I thought maybe it was just fraud, she continued. Credit card scams happen. But when the incident started on the 3rd floor, I knew it was more than that. The screaming, I whispered. Her eyes softened. Yes. I stared at my hands, noticing how pale my knuckles were against the paper cup. Was anyone hurt? Maya hesitated. The pause answered me before her words did. "There was a woman earlier this week," she said carefully. "Room 308. She checked out early." "Your," said she'd fallen, but the bruises didn't match a fall. The room seemed to shrink around me. The number, 308, echoed in my mind like a tolling bell. It wasn't just a random assignment. It was a pattern, a trap with a door number. I felt a strange mixture of nausea and gratitude. Nausea for what had been intended. Gratitude for the thin thread that had diverted it. Later that morning, 2 detectives arrived. Their questions were precise but not unkind. They asked about my online presence, my recent bookings, whether I had noticed suspicious emails. As they spoke, pieces began aligning into a shape I hadn't considered. Social media posts announcing travel plans, conference registrations visible to the public, tagged locations from past trips. "I wasn't hiding," I murmured. One detective offered a sympathetic smile. "You shouldn't have to." They explained that a small network had been targeting solo female travelers, gathering information from public profiles, duplicating IDs, checking in ahead of them. It wasn't random violence. It was calculated proximity. The thought made my skin prickle. Danger with a spreadsheet, malice with organization. Malice with organization. When they left, I sat on the bed staring at the patterned carpet, noticing how the swirling shapes resembled tangled threads. My life, my routines, my harmless posts, all strands someone else had woven into something darker. Ethan called again. I put him on speaker and told him everything. He was quiet for a long moment, the kind of quiet that meant he was choosing his words carefully. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said finally, "but the world isn't always fair to openness." "I know," I replied. I don't want to live afraid." "You don't have to live afraid," he said. "Just live aware, awareness." The word felt different from fear. Less paralyzing, more like turning on a light instead of barricading a door. That afternoon, I packed my suitcase slowly. Each folded shirt felt heavier than it had when I arrived. I kept glancing at the door, half expecting another knock, another test of the handle. Trauma doesn't always shout. Sometimes it lingers like a shadow that moves even when the light is steady. Before checking out, I went down to the lobby. Maya stood behind the counter again, her posture professional but her eyes warm. I placed a small envelope on the desk, a handwritten note inside. Nothing extravagant, just gratitude shaped into ink. "You didn't have to," she said. I know, I replied, but I wanted to. She smiled then, a real smile, the kind that reaches the corners of the eyes. Travel safe, Sienna. As I stepped outside, the Denver air felt crisp and clean, carrying the faint scent of pine from somewhere distant. The sky stretched wide and blue, indifferent to the events of the night before. Cars passed. People laughed. A dog barked at a pigeon. Life moved forward with its usual rhythm, but I walked differently. Not slower, not faster, just more present. My phone stayed in my hand instead of me. My gaze lifted from the sidewalk to the faces around me. Awareness settled over me like a new layer of skin. Sensitive, protective, alive. On the plane home, I closed my eyes and saw the hallway again. The flickering lights, the number 308 glowing softly on a brass plaque. Mux. I saw Maya's whisper, Ethan's messages, the officers' calm voices. The night replayed in fragments, each one a reminder of how easily paths can diverge. I realized then that betrayal doesn't always come from loved ones. Sometimes it comes from strangers who misuse your name, your habits, your visibility. And sometimes salvation comes from strangers, too. A receptionist with sharp instincts, a brother miles away who answers texts at midnight, an officer who speaks gently at a doorway. The world is not divided neatly into villains and heroes. It is filled with people making small choices, and some of those choices change. The weeks after Denver unfolded in a strange blur, not because life stopped, but because it continued too normally. Emails still arrived. Deadlines still approached. The grocery store still played soft music over its speakers, as if nothing in the world had shifted. Yet inside me, something had. I began checking locks. I noticed reflections in windows, footsteps behind me, the angle of parked cars. Awareness, at first, felt empowering, like a new pair of glasses bringing the world into sharper focus. But slowly, it began to feel heavier, like carrying a lantern that never dimmed. One evening, about 2 weeks after the incident, Ethan visited my apartment. He brought takeout and his usual protective energy, setting the containers on my small kitchen table as if nourishment alone could steady the storm inside me. The smell of sesame chicken filled the room, warm and savory, a comforting scent from childhood dinners when life felt simpler. "You're quieter," he observed gently, handing me a plate. "I'm thinking," I replied. "About Denver." I nodded. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the ticking of the wall clock filling the spaces between our thoughts. Finally, I looked up. I keep wondering if Maya hadn't said anything, if I'd just gone to 308 like I was supposed to. Ethan's jaw tightened. He set his fork down. "But you didn't." "I know," I said softly. "But the fact that I almost did, that's what lingers, the almost." He leaned back in his chair, studying me with the same careful attention he used when interviewing witnesses. "Almost doesn't define you. What you did after matters more. What I did after." I echoed. "You listened," he said. "You trusted someone. You trusted yourself. A lot of people ignore discomfort because they don't want to seem rude or paranoid." His words settled into me slowly. I had always prided myself on being polite, accommodating, easygoing. The kind of person who smiled at strangers and gave the benefit of the doubt. That night in Denver had forced me to choose between politeness and instinct had quietly won. A few days later, I received a call from one of the detectives. "Amenjist? And am I kind of Denovich and am I kind of Denver?" They had uncovered more details, accounts linked across cities, patterns of travel forums and social media groups. My name had appeared in a list, not because of anything dramatic, but because of ordinary visibility. Conference registrations, tagged locations, public posts about flight delays and hotel check-ins. We're connecting cases, I thanked him, but when the call ended, I sat on my couch staring at the blank television screen. Cooperation. Cases. Words that belong to crime dramas, not to the ordinary rhythm of my life. Yet here they were, stitched into my story. That night, I opened my laptop and began scrolling through my social media profiles. Photos of airports, captions about late, night flights, cheerful announcements of upcoming trips. None of it felt dangerous at the time. It felt like sharing, a digital diary of movement and ambition. I started deleting posts. Not out of fear, but out of reclamation. Each click felt like closing a window that had been left open too long. I adjusted privacy settings, removed public itineraries, changed passwords. It wasn't paranoia, it was ownership. And tick. Still, something inside me remained unsettled. Awareness alone wasn't enough. I didn't want my story to end as a quiet cautionary tale whispered among friends. I wanted it to become something constructive, a bridge instead of a wall. The idea came unexpectedly, like most meaningful ideas do. I was at a small cafe near my apartment, the smell of roasted coffee beans thick in the air, when I overheard two women discussing solo travel. Their excitement was contagious, laughter over maps, plans scribbled on napkins. But then one of them hesitated, mentioning safety concerns, the way her family worried. I felt a familiar tightening in my chest. And then I heard myself speak. "May I offer a suggestion?" I asked gently, stepping into their conversation with a smile. They looked up, surprised but receptive. I shared a few practical tips, checking hotel reviews thoroughly, avoiding public posts about nothing dramatic. Just small layers of awareness. They thanked me warmly, and as I walked back to my table, I realized something had shifted. My voice had steadied. My experience, once a source of quiet fear, had become a tool. That was the beginning. I started writing, first a short post on a professional networking site about travel safety, then a longer article on a blog. I didn't sensationalize the story. I focused on the lessons, intuition, discretion, the value of observant strangers. Messages began to arrive from women who had felt uneasy during trips, but dismissed their instincts, from others who had encountered suspicious situations and didn't know how to articulate them. Each message carried a mixture of gratitude and relief. It wasn't that my story was unique, it was that it gave language to something many had felt. Months later, I received an email from Maya. She had found my article through a mutual contact. Her message was brief but heartfelt. "I'm glad you're turning it into something meaningful," she wrote. "I still think about that night sometimes. I'm just grateful it ended the way it did." Kept a tech. I replied immediately, thanking her again, though the words never felt sufficient. How do you quantify the value of a whisper that altered a path? How do you repay quiet vigilance? You don't. You honor it by passing it forward. I began volunteering with a local travel safety workshop, speaking to small groups in community centers and libraries. I described practical steps, but I also spoke about dignity, the importance of not letting fear shrink your world. Awareness was not meant to cage us. It was meant to guide us. The first time I stood in front of a room and told my story aloud, my voice trembled. I could still hear the echo of that scream in the hallway, still see the brass numbers on a door I never opened. But as I looked at the faces listening, attentive, thoughtful, understanding, the tremble steadied. I realized then that healing isn't a single moment of closure. It's a series of small acts that reclaim your narrative. Denver would always be a chapter in my life, but it no longer defined the entire book. It became a turning point, the place where vulnerability met awareness, where fear met purpose. And somewhere in that transformation, I began to feel like myself again. Not the version of me who walked into the Pinecrest Hotel exhausted and unsuspecting, but a version shaped by experience rather than overshadowed by it. The lantern of awareness still burned, but now it illuminated paths instead of casting shadows. The story didn't stay private for long. I never intended it to become public in any grand way. My first article was meant to be a quiet offering, a few paragraphs tucked into the corner of the internet like a note pinned to a bulletin board. But the internet has a way of carrying whispers farther than shouts. One morning, I woke to dozens of notifications on my phone. Messages from women I had never met. Emails from bloggers asking to share my piece. A local radio producer requesting a short interview. My first instinct was hesitation, that familiar tightening in my chest that asked, "Do you really want to relive this out loud?" But another voice answered quietly, "If it helps someone else avoid that hallway, yes." The radio interview was small, almost intimate, a 10-minute segment on a weekday morning. The host spoke gently, her tone warm and respectful. She didn't sensationalize the story. She asked about intuition, about travel habits, about the importance of listening when something feels off. Afterward, I sat in my kitchen staring at the condensation on my coffee mug, watching tiny droplets gather and fall. I realized my hands were steady, not because the memory no longer hurt, but because the hurt had. Still, publicity carries its own weight. At a family gathering a few weeks later, my aunt pulled me aside near the dessert table, her voice hushed. "I heard you on the radio," she said. "I worry about you traveling alone." Her concern was genuine, wrapped in love, but it echoed the fear I had worked hard not to let define me. I smiled and squeezed her hand. "I'm not stopping," I said softly. "I'm just traveling smarter." That became my refrain. Not stopping, just traveling smarter. It was a simple sentence, but it held my balance, acknowledging risk without surrendering freedom. The broader attention also meant confronting opinions that. A few online comments questioned why I had shared travel details publicly in the first place, as if openness were a flaw rather than a human habit. At first, those words stung. They felt like small stones thrown from behind invisible walls. Ethan reminded me of something important during one of our nightly calls. "People comment from the safety of distance," he said. "They don't see the full picture." "You do." He was right. The full picture included Maya's vigilance, the officer's calm professionalism, the strangers who reached out with gratitude. Menace. It included fear, yes, but it also included community, a network of people choosing to look out for one another. The most unexpected moment came months later, when a travel conference invited me to speak. Standing backstage, listening to the murmur of the audience filtering through the curtain, I felt the old nervousness return. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. Then I remembered the hallway, the door handle rattling, the whisper that changed everything. I stepped onto the stage and told the story not as a spectacle, but as a lesson in awareness and compassion. I spoke about Maya, about the quiet heroism of noticing something small and choosing to act. I spoke about Ethan, about the value of having someone who answers late-night messages without hesitation. And I spoke about myself, not as a victim, but as a traveler who learned that intuition is a form of self-respect. When the session ended, a young woman approached me. She held her conference badge nervously, her voice barely above a whisper. "I canceled a trip once because something didn't feel right," she said. "Everyone told me I was overreacting. Hearing you, it makes me feel less foolish." I smiled. "You weren't foolish," I replied. "You were listening." Moments like that reshaped the narrative in my mind. The night at the Pinecrest Hotel no longer felt like a private scar. It became a shared reference point, a reminder that safety often depends on small decisions and collective awareness rather than grand gestures. Yet healing was not linear. Some nights when I checked into a new hotel, the old tension returned. I would stand in the doorway for a second too long, listening to the silence, testing the lock twice. Trauma doesn't vanish, it softens. It becomes a background note instead of the entire melody. I learned to greet that note with patience rather than. Awareness didn't mean suspicion of everyone. It meant recognizing discomfort and responding with care, not panic, not denial. Care. Maya and I stayed in occasional contact. Short emails, holiday greetings. Once, she wrote about a promotion she had earned at the hotel, her pride evident even through simple. I congratulated her, silently grateful that the night which bound our stories together had not overshadowed her future. She had acted not for recognition, but because it was right. The world needs more people like that, people who notice. As my advocacy grew, I found myself emphasizing not only caution, but kindness. I encouraged travelers to treat hotel staff with respect, to value their attentiveness, to remember that safety is often a shared effort. Awareness is not a solitary shield, it's a collective light. There was a dignity in that realization. I was not merely recounting an incident. I was participating in a conversation about responsibility, to ourselves and to one another. The public consequence of my story was not fame or notoriety. It was connection. It was the steady stream of messages from people who felt seen, who felt empowered to trust their instincts, who understood that vigilance and freedom can cope. And perhaps that was the most important lesson. The world is not made safer by silence. It is made safer by thoughtful voices that refuse to be swallowed by fear. I still travel. I still walk into hotel lobbies with my suitcase rolling behind me. But now when I receive a key card, I also receive a quiet reminder that awareness is an ally, that strangers can be guardians, and that a single whisper, offered at the right moment, can ripple outward into countless acts of protection. The night in Denver did not end my independence. It refined it. It gave it depth, purpose, and a gentler strength. Healing did not arrive like sunlight bursting through curtains. It arrived like morning fog lifting slowly, almost imperceptibly, until one day I realized I could see the road ahead again. There were still nights when the memory visited me uninvited. A hotel hallway that smelled too strongly of disinfectant, a knock that the metallic click of a door latch. These small sensory echoes could pull me backward without warning, but I learned not to fight them. Resistance only tightened their grip. Instead, I acknowledged them quietly, like greeting an old acquaintance I no longer feared. I remember, I would think, and I'm still here. That simple sentence became a private ritual, a way to ground myself when anxiety brushed against my ribs like a passing shadow. I also began to notice the ways my life had expanded rather than shrunk. I chose hotels more carefully. Yes, I shared fewer real, time details online. But I also explored cities with a deeper appreciation for their textures, the smell of fresh bread drifting from early morning bakeries, the sound of street musicians tuning their guitars, the warmth of sunlight reflecting off glass buildings. Awareness sharpened beauty as much as it sharpened caution. One autumn afternoon, nearly a year after Denver, I returned to the city for a conference. The invitation had arrived months earlier, and my first instinct had been to decline, but something inside me resisted avoidance. Avoidance, I realized, can quietly become a cage if you're not careful. So I went. The air was crisp when I stepped out of the airport, carrying the faint scent of pine and distant smoke from fireplaces beginning their seasonal rituals. Denver looked exactly as it had before, mountains standing patient on the horizon, traffic flowing in familiar patterns. The city had not changed. I had. I didn't stay at the Pinecrest Hotel. That chapter didn't need revisiting in a literal sense. Instead, I chose a different hotel across town, one filled with bright windows and open spaces. When I checked in, I met the receptionist's eyes with a calm smile, offering the same courtesy I hoped to receive. The exchange felt ordinary, and that ordinariness was a quiet victory. During the conference, I spoke again about travel safety and intuition. But this time, my voice carried less tremor and more warmth. I wasn't recounting a wound. I was sharing a scar, evidence of healing rather than injury. After my talk, a middle-aged man approached me. His expression was thoughtful, almost hesitant. "My daughter travels for work," he said. "Hearing you, it helps me worry less. Not because the world is safer, but because she's more prepared." His words struck me gently. Prepared, not afraid. That distinction mattered more than I could explain. Fear paralyzes. Preparation empowers. The difference lies in dignity, in the way we carry ourselves through uncertain spaces. Later that evening, I walked alone through a nearby park, the leaves crunching beneath my shoes in shades of amber and gold. The air was cool against my cheeks, the sky fading from blue to violet. I felt a quiet gratitude settle over me. Gratitude not only for my safety, but for the strangers who had shaped my journey. Maya's attentiveness, the officer's professionalism, Ethan's unwavering presence. Gratitude, I discovered, is one of the most reliable companions in healing. It doesn't erase what happened, but it reframes it. It reminds you that alongside danger, there was kindness. Alongside fear, there was support. Alongside vulnerability, there was strength you hadn't yet recognized in yourself. My relationship with Ethan deepened in subtle ways, too. We spoke more openly, less hurriedly. He no longer texted me weather alerts as often. Not because he worried less, but because he trusted more. Trust, after all, is a two-way bridge. I trusted his guidance. He trusted my judgment. She remained a quiet presence in my life, like a lighthouse visible from afar. We exchanged occasional messages, birthday wishes, holiday greetings. She once wrote, "I'm glad you're doing well. I still watch the lobby differently now. In a good way." Her words reminded me that healing isn't solitary, where choices ripple outward, shaping others in ways we may never fully see. There were still moments of vulnerability. A sudden loud noise in a hallway could quicken my pulse. A stranger standing too close could trigger a flicker of unease. But those reactions softened with time, becoming signals rather than alarms. Signals I could acknowledge, assess, and release. I began journaling again, a habit I had abandoned years earlier. The pages filled with reflections rather than fears. I wrote about airports at dawn, about conversations with strangers that restored faith, about the delicate balance between openness and discretion. Writing became a mirror that showed not only where I had been. The experience also reshaped my understanding of courage. I used to think courage was loud, dramatic acts, bold declarations. Now I understood it differently. Courage is often quiet. It's choosing to travel again after a frightening night. It's speaking gently about difficult memories. It's trusting your instincts without letting them harden. Courage, I realized, is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move forward with awareness and grace. As the year drew to a close, I looked back on Denver not with trembling but with clarity. It had been a crossroads, a place where multiple paths converged. One led to fear and retreat. Another led to awareness and growth. The path I chose was shaped by small decisions, by strangers who cared, by a brother who answered late-night texts, by a receptionist who noticed what others might have overlooked. Healing did not mean forgetting. It meant remembering without reliving. And in that space, between memory and movement, I found peace. Not perfect peace, not permanent, but steady enough to carry me forward. Steady enough to let me walk into new cities with curiosity instead of dread. Steady enough to share my story without losing myself inside it. The night at the Pinecrest Hotel became part of my identity, yes, but only as one chapter among many. A chapter that taught me the value of intuition, the power of quiet heroism, and the resilience that grows when we refuse to let fear write our ending. Sometimes when I lie awake at night and the world grows still, I think about how close our lives often brush against unseen crossroads. A different choice, a delayed flight, a stranger's quiet warning. So many moments pass unnoticed, and yet one small decision can redirect an entire future. I often wonder what would have happened if I had smiled politely at Maya and insisted on the original room. If I had dismissed that whisper as inconvenience instead of intuition. The truth is, I'll never know, and perhaps not knowing is its own form of grace. What I do know is this, Pawn. We move through the world believing we are alone in our journeys, but we are not. We are surrounded by people whose small acts of awareness, kindness, and courage weave invisible safety nets beneath our steps. A receptionist who pays attention. A brother who answers midnight texts. An officer who speaks calmly at a doorway. Even strangers who share their stories so others may walk a little wiser. Life did not become smaller after that night. It became more intentional. I learned to listen, not only to the sounds around me, but to the quiet voice inside that says, pause, look again. Try. That voice is not fear. It is self, respect, and perhaps that is the lesson I carry forward. We do not have to live in suspicion to live in awareness. We do not have to harden our hearts to protect our lives. We simply have to notice, and to honor the instincts that have been whispering to us all along. If my story has done anything, I hope it has reminded you that intuition is not foolishness, that caution is not weakness, and that kindness, even from strangers, can be a lifeline we never expected. So I'll leave you with a gentle question, the kind that lingers softly rather than demands an answer. If you felt that quiet warning in your chest, would you listen to it, even if no one else understood why? Thank you for walking this story with me, for sharing your time and your thoughts. If this journey resonated with you, If it reminded you of your own moments of intuition or courage, I invite you to share your reflections. Your voice might be the whisper that guides someone else to safety one day. And wherever your travels take you, may you move forward not with fear, but with awareness, dignity, and the quiet confidence that your instincts are worthy of trust.